Chiefs Kingdom, welcome back to the Papa Strong Nose podcast. Got a good one in store for you. Got a visitor stopping by as EDJ drops by the podcast, talk about the Super Bowl, AFC Championship game, wrap up a little bit, and just all around Chiefs football. Got into a little bit of Royals baseball right there at the end as well. So shout out EDJ. That's coming up, of course, in the podcast. Really, it's Super Bowl week. It's exciting. Exciting times, Chiefs Kingdom. I'm pumped. Everything leading up to this game. Rematch, of course, Super Bowl 54. Got all kinds of stuff coming this week. I'm very excited, content-wise. Wherever you get your podcast needs, especially, as well as over on YouTube. Just put up the Madden 24 simulation yesterday on the YouTube channel. Check that out if you missed it. Pretty wild a game just in general. A little bit of feeding into kind of what we talked about on this episode as well. So without further ado, I'm just going to get right into our time with EDJ as he joins the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen of the kingdom, I would like to welcome back on to the podcast Mr. EDJ.
Well, my friend, I tell you, I don't even know what to say at this point. I mean, it's just such a shame that Patrick is such a terrible road quarterback, and, it's just a shame that the Chiefs couldn't possibly win on the road. Oh, wait, they did twice against the two best teams in football. Oh, that's really weird. I wonder if it has something to do with the fact that the Chiefs actually are the best team in football. That's so funny. Oh, that's right. Because they are. They have been. They have been for what, 6-7 years now? I mean, it's ridiculous to say anything less than this is where we expected them to be. Now, at the middle point of this year, I thought we were done for. No one could catch anything, as someone said earlier in the year. MVS couldn't even catch a cold, and that's probably true. So, it's been a lot of work. It was very reminiscent of Brady's last year and winning Super Bowl in New England with that kind of team. Not very good offensively. But we're back for the 5 millionth time, which is so weird to say growing up and seeing them win 2 games every 4 years. So, I mean, we're in the right spot.
That's a fact. No, that's absolutely a fact. I like how you just led straight into it because you're absolutely right. Who would have thought other than any of us here in Kansas City? Because at the end of the day, and we talked about this when we were young, I mean, because like you said, I mean, we grew up as Chiefs fans. The Chiefs were, for lack of a better term, somewhat of a laughingstock of the NFL for much of our growing up. I mean, there was definitely some runs in there sprinkled in, but, we kind of talked about, if the Chiefs were ever good, would the league actually, I wouldn't say the league, but, at this point being an adult, but I would say, would people give the Chiefs their flowers, their props? And I think all this season has shown us is absolutely not. They will never. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Snead is the best corner in the league, hands down. Like, there's not a stat, anything you can put in my face that would get me to think otherwise at this point, because I've looked at all the stats. The one thing he doesn't have is interceptions. That's the only thing that you can hold against L'Jarius Sneed, and that's absolutely insane that man didn't miss the Pro Bowl. He wasn't an All-Pro. I don't even think he was second-team All-Pro. I think McDuffie got second-team All-Pro above him. And shout out to Trent McDuffie. He's great, but L'Jarius Sneed is better. And that's no slight to Trent McDuffie because this is the best defense in the league. They've proved that time in and time out. And I had a stat sitting here somewhere that the 49ers are number 3 in the league, points per game. They're at like 28 points per game, right? The Chiefs are at 17 in that range. That's the gap from 2 to 3. And then the Chiefs just went into Baltimore and beat the number 1 defense overall points per game with this Rudy Poo offense that they've got running out there, ragtag group that has still found themselves in a Super Bowl. And that's not to slight anyone on this team at this point. Just, call a spade, right? Like, this team has not performed to the level that they should have all year. They are right now, and that's what matters. And that's at the end of the day, that's why this is the best team in the league. They know when it counts, and they show up and they perform when it matters.
Well, I mean, you hit it on the head with that. But showing up when it matters and having a strategy that works when it matters. You saw in Buffalo, their strategy was, um, you know, basically spread the field, find an open man, get down. It was first down and down, basically, is what their strategy was. No turnovers, we won't talk about McColl. And, and no mistakes. And that was the point of the Buffalo game. Now, the Baltimore game was punch them in the mouth and play defense. And that's exactly what they did. I mean, I think people really are starting to underestimate Andy Reid, and people have no idea. Well, they do now. But, I don't think people really had the idea of how good Spagnuolo was until this year. And, everyone said, well, he's a good, all-time playoff coordinator. No, he's a good coordinator, period. I mean, he literally built this defense to be the best defense in football, you said.
And not to mention, Steve Spagnuolo didn't even get mentioned in the same breath as the Ben Johnsons, the Bobby Slovics. As assistant of the year, Steve Spagnuolo not even in the conversation. The best defensive coordinator in the league.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, I don't understand why he wasn't. And Ben Johnson did a great job.
Absolutely.
If Campbell knew how to run the ball every now and then, I think we'd be playing the Lions. But there's no reason why we shouldn't be playing the Lions. But
if he knew how to took some points here once in a while.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what his plan was in that one. But, that's fine. We'll play the Niners again. It's almost a mirroring image of when, we played them the first time with Jimmy Garoppolo, but it's Brock Purdy. It's the same style offense, not really that good of a quarterback, but he can work in that system. Spagnuolo, I think, will find ways to trouble Purdy because their defense is much better than it was the first Super Bowl, and I think that's going to be a biggest X factor in this one.
The two best quarterbacks left in the league out there, and really your elite level of quarterbacks, which I just want to point out that's not Patrick Mahomes' level. Patrick Mahomes' level is one of one at the very top. The elite level of quarterback play would be probably your Lamar Jackson, your Josh Allen, your Joe Burrow. Obviously, Joe Burrow out to injury, and I think that's really that tier, right? The Chiefs went on the road and beat Josh Allen. But they were able to put up 24 points. Okay. What was it? How many points did the Ravens even score? 10? Was it 10?
I couldn't really tell, but it was 10, I think.
I think it was 10 off the top of my head. That's how boring their offense was. That's how terrible they were last week. I can't even remember. I just know it was not anything near what they were putting up. They were putting up like 30-some points a game at home. So you went in and you beat the best two quarterbacks. And this is something I'm going to ask any guest that comes on this show this week. How good is Brock Purdy?
I would say he's probably on the level of a Geno Smith, a Kyler Murray tier. I don't know what tier you want to put that at, but we're talking third tier.
Right.
He's not. There's nothing out there that you can point to and be like, he's really good at that. He's good at not turning the ball over.
Yeah.
But so is Jimmy Garoppolo.
So my point there is you just faced two of the elite quarterbacks in this league and beat them. One of them you absolutely shut down. That's going to be the MVP here in a few days. Absolutely shut him down. And didn't do anything hardly. I mean, by the end of it, the yardage looked, decent, but I think at one point he was 5 for 20 or something like that, Lamar Jackson. So if that's what Lamar Jackson does against the Chiefs defense, how in the world does anyone think the 49ers are going to move the football against the Kansas City Chiefs? And before we get into that, I understand the running game. And the running game and Kyle Shanahan and what the Shanahan system is all about. But the Chiefs also showed that they can shut that down too against Baltimore, I think. And the Buffalo game, I think Nick Wright kind of hit it on the head that I didn't necessarily believe it until the AFC Championship game, but the fact that they kind of gave away the run. They kind of let the Bills have the run game. The Bills absolutely ran all over them, and they kind of gave them that. But they were not. This one thing about this defense: bend, do not break. This defense does not break. It is very, very rare to see the defense break. And even when you get to the goal line, I mean, you mentioned McCole Hardman. I mean, he was wearing number 4 in purple last week in Baltimore, fumbling at the goal line. I mean, bend but do not break. That is the motto of this defense this year.
Well, it really is, and I think like you said, Nick Wright brought up a good point, and you've reiterated it well. The Chiefs basically gave the Bills the ability to run the clock, and I think Andy Reid saw that McDermott was, I think Nick Wright said it best, playing not to lose to Mahomes.
Yes. Yep.
And you saw that pretty early, that the shots weren't going to be taken. They were going to run the ball. They were going to try to eat the clock. And I want to flip that to last week. Look how much time of possession the Chiefs had compared to the Ravens.
Yeah.
It's astronomical. The Chiefs, I think, had the ball for a full half before halftime, if I'm not mistaken, or close to it. And I think it was it was something ridiculous.
They didn't have the ball a ton.
No, they didn't. And I mean that goes back to and I don't know what Harbaugh was thinking when you have a run game that can be very electric, and that gives you a lot of points, and you have a quarterback that can do that. But it just showed in the 2 games the Chiefs have played that Mahomes has the Michael Jordan effect.
Yeah.
You play to beat Michael Jordan. You didn't play to beat the Bulls. You play to beat Metro Mahomes. You don't play to beat the Chiefs. And that's being more prevalent as, at least these playoffs have gone on. Because, I mean, I haven't seen one team come out and double team Travis Kelce. He's been 28, in his playoffs this year. I mean, he's just found the fountain of youth all of a sudden. So I don't know. I don't know what any teams are doing, but it's not working.
11 catches on 11 targets, 116 yards for Travis Kelce. I mean, just went out and had the single, probably best playoff performance he's ever had. And to your point of the time of possession, the Chiefs ended up with 37 and a half minutes of possession time versus the Ravens, 22 and a half. Right at 30. 73 offensive plays for the Chiefs to 57 for the Ravens.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I mean, so the Chiefs had it for over half the game.
Yes.
And they played nearly double the plays the Ravens did.
And then you're talking about Lamar Jackson dropping back 37 times versus 20 rushing plays.
You know what? Can we talk about that for a second? Because I know.
I know
you're going to have Ray on here in a couple of days. I just want him to hear it from me. He's going to love that. But that is how you beat Lamar Jackson. And he knows that. But if you force him to drop back, if you force him to stay in the pocket, it doesn't work. He becomes a completely different guy. And that's the huge issue. And we talked about this years ago on Showmix. It's a huge issue for him. And it's a huge issue for the Ravens because you just paid him. How much did they pay him?
Honestly, not sure. Off the top of my head, I'll pull it up.
Someone said $85 million he got this year. Something like that. For 58. I'm sorry, 58. Just like 58. So he got $58 million this year. I believe. You can check that. But
I'm looking it up, yeah.
Anything over 50, you've got to have the ability to throw in the pocket. You've got to have the ability.
Okay, not 50 yet, so my bad to cut you off, but we're a cap hit of 22.1 this year, and it goes up until in 2026 it hits 74.6.
Okay.
He is 26.3% of the cap at this point. It is 29-year-old season in 2026. It'll stay the same the following year, and then you go into some void years.
I just don't know what you do. I mean, well, let's break these down in, non-mocking ways. But
he could have done it. I mean, he could have done it. He should have ran the ball more, plain and simple.
He should have ran the ball.
And
when
go ahead.
When he broke that tackle, when he caught his own pass.
Oh man, dude, yeah, no, that one, that was like a bad omen. It felt like.
Yeah, Tranquil saved a touchdown.
Yeah.
If you look at the film, no one's behind Tranquil.
Yeah.
So I mean, if he breaks it there, and what else was interesting? Someone brought this up to me. He was hand fighting with L'Jarius Sneed.
Yes.
Why are you hand fighting?
Tackling, but that's one thing. This Chiefs team is absolutely built to beat Lamar Jackson. Just because of the guys that you have on defense. How good of a tackler is L'Jarius Sneed? How good of a tackler is Trent McDuffie? Justin Reed, Drew Tranquil, Nick Bolton. I mean, these are guys that if you get wrapped up, like, you are very lucky. And I mean, he got away from Leo Chanel at one point in the backfield that I was dumbfounded by. Like, I couldn't believe it. And at the end of the day, Jeff Saturday made a really interesting point. And ever since he made this point, I've watched Lamar Jackson much differently just on film and stuff, because I actually today was just going through the AFC Championship game film, and he is a conservative pocket quarterback. When he is in the pocket, he's very conservative, and I saw that. And the way he throws the ball, he throws it like it's a dart almost. I don't love Lamar's mechanics when it comes to just staying in the pocket because it looks awkward in a way. And not that he can't do it, but, again, I think that's more of a failure on the organization because, like you said, we talked about this years ago on the Showbank Show. And one thing that I felt like was a consensus for me was we know where he's at now. Where do you go in the future? Where are you at in 3 to 5 years, which is where we're at right now? That was 2019 that we recorded that? 18, 19, somewhere around in there?
It's funny. I was listening to that particular show the other day.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it may have been 2019 or 2020, but
I think it was before the lockdown.
It was before COVID.
Yeah, so I think it was 2019 then is where we were. But they haven't done enough to progress him, I think, at this point. But it got under his skin that, the Chiefs, they said make him throw. I saw a quote, and I don't know if it was a real quote or not, from Chris Jones, that, if he's throwing the ball, we know we're going to win or something to that effect. And, and I get that because Mahomes does that. And again, go back to that Michael Jordan effect. Michael Jordan can't play defense. What does he do? He goes and wins like 5 Defensive Player of the Year awards in a row or something like that. Michael Jordan can't, shoot from deep. He goes out and, hits 6 threes in a row, the shrug. And that's how Patrick Mahomes is. And I just don't think you can't be on that level until you're here, right? Because Mahomes will go out there and prove you wrong at everything you done said about him. But at the same time, this is a quarterback that's led his team to the Super Bowl 4 times now. This is a quarterback that's went to 6 straight AFC Championship games. This is a quarterback that's won 2 Super Bowls, has a chance to win a 3rd on Sunday. What has Lamar Jackson done? You can't eat at the critics yet because you haven't even won the championship yet. You haven't even got there yet. And that's not even to slight Lamar necessarily because I totally get it. I get where he wants to prove he can win with his arm. But really, at the end of the day, does it matter if you get the job done? And that's what Patrick Mahomes has done this postseason. Patrick Mahomes goes out and gets the job done. He's not really looking to do anything. He's not forcing anything. There was one on film that he was eyeing down the field to Justin Watson. Had double coverage. He probably could have made the throw. He probably could have made the throw, right? But instead, he checks it down to Noah Gray for like 5 yards. And that just goes to show to me, in the regular season, he would have pushed it probably. He would have pushed it down the field. And that's how they played this regular season, right? But now that we're in the playoffs, no more chances like that. No more, he's making the right reads, and he's going to check it down if he doesn't have something deep. And then same thing should have happened for Lamar. I mean, The moments that he could have ran, that just blew my mind that he didn't. And it all kind of goes back to kind of what I said going into the game. Keep Lamar contained in, I don't want to say the pocket necessarily, but in that general area. If you keep him toward the middle of the field and are able to get pressure on him, as long as he doesn't get the edge on you, you really don't have too much to worry about, unless it's a designed run play.
Well, yeah, and I think we saw that last Sunday. It was a lot of coming in, not necessarily from the corners, but from,
Yep.
the far end and on the inside, to force him to try to roll out or, keep him from getting outside the pocket. And that was the biggest, game plan for Spagnuolo. There was a lot of gap blitzing, and a lot of different looks that Lamar hadn't seen all year, and it worked really well. I mean, it started to really rattle him in the second half, and you could tell.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the first and start of the second half, because you had the strip sack, and then you had Justin Reed's sack. They were just starting to get to him at the end of the game, and you could tell by his throws they were a yard or two long, as Romo said. If he just waits a second, those are on the money, but he didn't because he couldn't. And that's and it's hard to say that, but this is kind of the tail of the tape we see with these quarterbacks, and not just Lamar. We're talking about Josh Allen. We're talking about Lamar Jackson. We're talking about even Justin Herbert. I mean, look at these guys who are very talented, but when it comes down to the chips are on the table, what you got? Josh Allen goes out, blows himself up for 4 quarters, and doesn't have it at the end of the game because he's put so much into the first 57 minutes, but all of his games come down to 3 minutes. He just doesn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And with Lamar, if he can't run, you got to figure something else out, and they just couldn't figure it out.
And there wasn't even really the threat of it, right? And I think that's a
Right.
big part of it too, because when you have the threat, at least, not saying that just he didn't pose that will on in the AFC Championship game. That's mainly what I'm getting to, is he just didn't impose the run from himself, and so that's why it wasn't a air quote threat, just for that game, and the Chiefs knew it. And at some point, I agree with you. In the second half, it was like they got in his head. You could tell he was second guessing everything. The way he was moving around in the pocket, he didn't want to scramble, but at the same time he didn't have anything open, kind of moving around. Like, it just wasn't. They had one play. They had one play the entire game, and that one was I think it was the one I was talking about where Chanel had him, wrapped up dead to rights, and Lamar gets out of it somehow, scrambles around and launches one to Zay Flowers, where Nick Bolton is on coverage and just didn't even have a chance.
Yeah, and I don't know why Bolton was the coverage on Zay Flowers.
Well, just because that play wasn't supposed to be extended that long. I mean, Zay Flowers had an underneath route. Bolton had to take it when he went deep. I mean, it wasn't, because I saw a lot of that on Twitter, was what the hell is Bolton doing out there? Well, like when you extend the play for 10 seconds, like you're wanting to get a throw off between 3 and 5 seconds, right? I mean, 5 seconds is an eternity in the pocket, and Lamar pretty much ended up with probably 10 to 12 seconds on that play.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean that's the thing too. It's the little coverages that you don't see that the Chiefs had. And like we talked about with Tranquil being the spy or Chanel being the spy, Willie Gay not being there was missed because he's usually the spy backer more times than not. But Tranquil and Chanel, those guys are very underrated in coverage. I think for linebackers. They're just very talented in what they do in that aspect.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. That being said, going into this game, Super Bowl 58, Kansas City Chiefs, San Francisco 49ers, what do you think is going to be really the X factor of this game?
Well, if you recall, last time we had Chiefs and Niners, I said this, and I don't know how I was so accurate, but I think it was 1 point off from it being the exact score.
Yeah.
But it's going to come down to it's it's literally the same thing that happened 4 years ago. It's going to come down to it's time to throw the ball. Can you do it?
Mm-hmm.
And this is what the Chiefs defense has done so well all year. You saw it even against Tua in the wild card. It's time to throw the ball now. Can you do it? I mean, it's what they've done all year. The Chiefs offense isn't as good as it has been. Everyone knows that. But that's not why they're there. They're there because of the defense.
Yes.
So now what the Niners have to figure out is how many times can Christian McCaffrey carry the team to the promised land before the lights go out? How many more times can Deebo Samuel find that 5-yard end-around wheel route, that goes 70 yards? At some point, you have to throw the ball with Brock Purdy. And at some point, it's not going to work.
No.
So, I mean, I think it's almost identical to 4 years ago. It's going to come down to, can Purdy make the big throw and win the game? And I think the answer is no.
I 100% agree with you. You've heard many people say it. What do these playoff games come down to? The quarterback, right? Quarterback versus quarterback. I mean, it's not a discussion. I mean, at the end of the day, on the other side, on the flip side of things, another thing you always hear: defense wins championships, right? I don't think it's a discussion the other way around either. The Chiefs defense is absolutely head and shoulders above the 49ers defense. I don't know if the 49ers defense is as good as it was last time around. And maybe, it's recency bias of just how good the Chiefs defense is. And, I'd have to go back and really look at that team. I mean, I remember Richard Sherman was on that team. Travarius Ward's been playing out of his mind. Shout out to the former Chief making it back to the Super Bowl. And then the other corner they got, I can't think off the top of my head, but he's been playing really well in the playoffs. Fred Warner obviously is amazing. But when it comes down to the Chiefs defense and the mind of Spagnuolo, because you talk about that Miami game and the interception that Mike Edwards had, where they came out in a 2-high shell, they flipped it pre-snap to a 1-high shell. Then while the play was going, I mean, they literally pretty much a defensive ring around the rosy play, where then they shift back into a 2-high shell, confuse the hell out of Tua, and he throws it right to the safety. Like, and the breakdown I saw that of one of the guys that I watch breakdown film literally said, I've never seen that in my entire life. Anyone do that. Spagnuolo is writing the book right now, right? Like, Spags is on another level, and like they said, in Spags we trust, and what they're worried about is the run defense. Tonight, at the opening night, Chris Jones was asked about the run defense, and he smiled and said, in Spags we trust. They know what's up. They know what's coming, and they're ready for it.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a good point. And I will say, watching that Bills game two weekends ago, I was kind of like, eh. I mean, that was a little rough.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch the Ravens game, and like, okay, it got a little better, but now you go against a team, like you said, that this is their run game is their setup for everything. The short passes, the over-the-top passes, the play action. It's very rare in the NFL level, anyway, to see a team set up play action or set up running the ball to throw the ball.
Mm-hmm.
It's very Titan-esque, if you will. It's going to be a challenge for the Niners to figure out, where that run scheme is going to fit in. And it's going to be a challenge for the Chiefs to make sure, that all of their bases are covered, because the Niners do have speed on the corners. They have Brandon Ayuk. They have Deebo Samuel. They have George Kittle. I mean, that offense is wildly talented.
Yes.
But can you get all the weapons active together? And like you said, switching from, the 1 shell to the 2 shell to the high man, it's like watching a science project, on the field. He just does things that are so weird, and you think, oh, that's not going to work, and it does work.
Mm-hmm.
All those corner blitzes that you didn't really see much, very often in the league, that now you're seeing quite regularly because of the success rate that Spags was having with them. And I think you're going to see that more and more as the league progresses, but those corner blitzes are going to confuse Purdy big time, and I think it's going to be a huge factor in that just not from necessarily the pressure up front, because the Chiefs don't do a whole lot of that other than the edges, but just the overall collapsing, having Justin Reed sneak out of the backfield and then, or out of the secondary in the backfield, having Trent McDuffie come across the edge. That's a huge problem that I don't think the Niners have seen.
That and the fact that you're running cover zero all the time, but you never know who the hell's coming. You got, all these guys up at the line, and all of a sudden, a D tackle drops off in coverage. I mean, I saw Derek Nottie a couple times on film dropping into coverage, just like, what are we doing here? Like, this is insane. It's awesome. It's working. It's crazy.
and the batted passes. That's something that
yes,
I have not really. You don't really necessarily think of, but the Chiefs lead the league in batted passes.
Yes, and they obviously teach that. I mentioned that in the film review. At some point, I feel like early to midway through the season of, you see it on film all the time. You see it on film, the guys getting their hands up when anyone's throwing. I mean, Chris Jones had a huge one in the Ravens game. And again, yeah, you like you said, you see it all year. Karlaftis, I think, led the league last year in batted passes at the line. So with that, I got two more things for you before we get out of here. First things first, MVS. What's your take on MVS after now we've seen two heroic playoff performances from MVS? Where are we at?
I mean, I call him two catch Vez because he gets just 2 catches a game, and that's about it. That's always good for, and that's okay. I mean, if that's what he wants to do, then that's what he can do. The wild thing is, last year he was kind of a reliable source for Mahomes, and he didn't really drop the ball that much last year, but this year I don't know what the deal is.
I think they were all swindling us. I think they all did it on purpose.
Well, I told you that a couple weeks ago. I feel like Andy was just having a good time.
Yeah, right.
With the league, but I think he is very capable, but he has to be consistent. He has to actually understand where that ball. And let's be clear, that catch to put the game away was not a beautiful catch.
No.
He had to turn around, make sure he brought it in the full way and not drop it on the way down.
He's so bad at tracking the ball. It's insane how bad he is. Like, sometimes on film, I'm just like, what are you even doing?
Well, he's bad at it, and so is McCole Hardman.
Yes.
If you watch...
that's what was so depressing about the Dolphins game. That catch Tyreek made and tracked down the ball and just like it was nothing. And then you watch the Chiefs receivers try to do the same thing. It's just like, dude, like... That's what we're missing. Like, that's what we had. That's what we're missing. It is what it is. I mean, we obviously have seen the Chiefs win without Tyreek Hill, but, to have a guy that can track the ball like that at that level, I mean, that's what the Chiefs offense, I think, is missing, really, at the end of the day.
You know what? We say this, but we haven't mentioned this guy, and I don't know why we haven't. Rashee Rice has turned into
absolutely
an absolute maniac in the playoffs. You know what I mean? He's come back to the ball. He's he's playing Patrick ball, if you will.
Yeah.
He's found the spots and sits and waits for the ball to throw to him, and that's what Patrick was used to.
And he's almost kind of grown into, I think, I'm pretty sure we've had this conversation too, is really all the Chiefs needed was somebody to fill that Juju role, right? What Juju Smith-Schuster did last year. And I think Rashee Rice has grown into that. At this point, like, that kind of just the light bulb went off as you were talking about Rashee Rice. But I think at this point, it's safe to say I think he's grown into that role and kind of taken over what Smith-Schuster's role was last year.
I agree. I think he's definitely, the number one receiver. And that's probably a fair comparison. I think he is the Juju, the team a little bit better. But, I think that does fit him pretty well. I would say he definitely has become the hands of the team, even though he did have some drops earlier in the year. But, a lot of that was learning, to play the position better.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And it's worked out in the Chiefs' favor. They stayed true to the plan and stayed the course. And, here we are in Super Bowl again, Chiefs and 49ers. So, one last thing. Any extras that you feel like you need to throw in here before we get out of here? and your score prediction. As again, you did mention 49ers versus Chiefs last time around, you were 1 point off. You had 31-21, I think?
I think it was 31-21. Yeah, it ended up being 31-20.
Yeah.
I don't see it getting that far. I think we'd probably be looking at 27-17. Well, it's a Chiefs game, let's be real. 27-24. And, because, that's just how they like to play them. But I think that 24 comes late in the fourth when the Niners are just trying to get the ball back. I don't think this is going to be as close as the media wants you to think it'll be. I don't think it'll be one of those, this will be an all-time Super Bowl. I think this will very quickly, I think you'll see in the first half, this game is going to get out of hand pretty quickly. Not so much for the Chiefs. I think it's going to get out of hand quickly for the Niners. I don't think they're going to be able to throw the ball at all. I don't think they're going to run the ball very well. So I'll probably say 27. We'll do 27-21 at the end of it. Mostly because of the fact, again, I'll say it again like I did 4 years ago, at some point, the 49ers are going to throw the football. And we know Brock Purdy doesn't play well until the fourth quarter, but he's going to have a deficit at the end. And I don't think he'll be able to make it up.
I could see it getting out of hand, but I don't know if necessarily the same way, and maybe you mean the same thing, but, it didn't feel like it during that Baltimore game that it was ever out of hand. Like the Chiefs had run away with it. But that's essentially what happened. 17-7, that game was out of hand. And so I think it may be kind of like that again, where the Chiefs kind of get out to a lead and they're able to, I don't want to say coast, but that defense is just that good.
That's what I'm getting at. I think you'll see very quickly that this was not a game the Niners were meant to win.
Yeah.
And I think you saw that in Baltimore too. I think you're right on that.
Yeah. Well, EDJ, it is always a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I thank you for stopping by and giving your take on this Super Bowl. It's exciting times here in Kansas City.
It's wild because, we every now and then I see that picture of us standing in the stands. I don't remember how many years ago it was. I think it was still when they were doing the Governor's Cup.
Yeah.
Between Chiefs and Rams in the preseason. But who was to think that, I don't know how long ago.
Hey, hold on, actually. That was 20 years ago. That was 2004.
Was it 20 years ago?
That was 20 years ago. Yeah, that was 2004.
Okay. So 20 years ago, who's to think that those kids would be told you're going to be playing in your fourth Super Bowl in 5 years?
Yeah.
Or 6 years, whatever it is. That would have been wild. And those teams in 2003, there's really no reason we didn't win a championship. The only reason we didn't win in 2003 is because of Peyton Manning. Let's be honest. Peyton
Manning and lack of a defense. But I feel you because they beat Peyton Manning there.
There's no one else in the AFC at that point because that offense was so good.
Yeah.
But oh well. Hey, we had to wait 20 years, but you know what? I'm a Royals fan. I'm used to it anyway. So.
Hey, before you get out of here about the Royals, how about Bobby Witt?
Well, it's about time the Royals did something right about the star for the Royals. It's been such a long time coming. They dropped the ball on Hosmer the second time. They dropped the ball on all those guys the second time. But I think the new ownership finally realizes that we need a star for a long period of time other than Salvador. And I think Bobby Wood Jr. is finally the answer. So I think they finally did something good for the Royals. It's going to take a while, but I think they finally did something good for the Royals for once.
Yeah, I think they're on their way finally. But again, appreciate you coming on the podcast, and we'll definitely have EDJ on again before too long because right after this, we're going to kick right into draft season. So I'm sure at some point.
That's going to be a thing. I appreciate it, buddy. And then, like I said, let Ray know that I'm waiting for his response.
Oh, okay. Shout out to Ray real quick. And I do have one last question for you. This is just from Ray, just based off conversations me and him have had. So, in 2024 right now, Lamar Jackson or Trevor Lawrence, who you taking?
I'm I'm still taking Lamar Jackson. I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean,
Respect.
I can be fair. I mean, I still take Lamar Jackson over Trevor. I like Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
I really do.
Well, that was the point, because I think that episode you were kind of banging the table for Trevor Lawrence when we were talking about
and I do like Trevor Lawrence, and I think he can be a very big star in the NFL. But I mean, if you put them on the table today, I think you take Lamar over Trevor, but their playoff successes are pretty much identical. So I mean, I don't know what you
The only thing I would have to say is that Lamar did reach an AFC Championship game. He did get there, at least at this point.
True, but I think true.
Yeah.
But I mean,
he's edging. He's just edging right over Lawrence, I would say.
Well, it's what, 2 playoff wins compared to 1?
Damn, yeah, all right. Well, you put it like that.
I mean, if you put it like that, but I mean, right now, I'll give Ray that one. I will say I would still take Lamar for now.
Well, that's fair.
Not by much.
I think that's fair. We'll, I'm sure that'll be brought up later in the week as well. At some point, stay tuned, folks. At some point, stay tuned, because we might just have this debate on the pod once again in the off season with EDJ and Ray. So stay tuned for that. Again, EDJ, appreciate you stopping by, and we will talk to you next time.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
So you heard it here first on the Papa Shro Knows podcast. EDJ has it 27-17, and stay tuned the rest of the week. Got plans to have other guests on the show. Ray and Randy going to return to the show a little bit later on in the week as we get ready for Super Bowl 58 this Sunday. Coverage around the clock right here on the Papa Shro YouTube channel. The podcast, of course, as well. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast needs. But I just appreciate it for everyone that's listening and listened through this whole thing. I really appreciate it again. And smash that like button, hit that subscribe, hit the follow button on Spotify and wherever you're listening. Throw that like. It helps the channel out tremendously. And again, stay tuned. Got film reviews coming as well as another podcast, at least one more podcast this week before we hit Super Bowl 58. Trying to pump out as much content as possible. We'll follow along on IG at Papa Shro Knows, at Papa Shro on Twitter /X, whatever you want to call that thing over there, as well as on TikTok at Papa Shro as well. We'll check out all the socials, and until next time, you already know the deal. Super Bowl week, baby. Go Chiefs!